In the quiet suburbs of Oakwood, where manicured lawns stretched as far as the eye could see, Lisa and Mark Thompson lived what seemed to be a picture-perfect life. Their home, a charming two-story colonial with a white picket fence, stood as a testament to their hard work and dedication. But it was the recent addition to their family that truly made their house a home: their newborn son, Jacob. The Thompsons had always dreamed of having a child, and when Jacob arrived, it felt as though their world was finally complete. The tiny bundle of joy, with his father's blue eyes and his mother's button nose, became the center of their universe. Every coo, every smile, every little movement was a source of wonder and delight for the new parents. But there was another member of the Thompson household who had been eagerly awaiting Jacob's arrival: Lila, their loyal golden retriever. From the moment Lisa and Mark brought Jacob home from the hospital, Lila had appointed herself as the baby's unofficial guardian. She would lie for hours beside Jacob's crib, her tail thumping gently against the floor whenever the baby made a sound. Lisa often marveled at the bond between Lila and Jacob. "Look at them, Mark," she would say, her voice filled with warmth. "It's like they were meant to be best friends." Mark would chuckle and ruffle Lila's fur. "She's always been a good judge of character. Clearly she knows our little guy is something special." For the first few months, life in the Thompson household settled into a comfortable routine. Days were filled with diaper changes, feedings, and the soft lullabies Lisa would sing to Jacob as she rocked him to sleep. Nights were punctuated by the occasional cry from the nursery, with Lisa or Mark taking turns to check on their son. And through it all, Lila remained a constant, watchful presence. But as autumn gave way to winter and the nights grew longer and colder, something began to change. It started subtly at first, so subtly that Lisa and Mark barely noticed. Lila, who had always been the gentlest of creatures, began to act differently. It was Lisa who first noticed the change. One night, as she was about to drift off to sleep, a sound caught her attention. It wasn't Jacob's cry. She had become attuned to every little noise her baby made. No, this was something else entirely. A low rumbling sound that seemed to vibrate through the quiet house. Confused and slightly alarmed, Lisa sat up in bed, her heart pounding. "Mark," she whispered, shaking her husband's shoulder. "Do you hear that?" Mark, still half asleep, mumbled incoherently. But as the sound grew louder, his eyes snapped open. "What is that?" he asked, his voice thick with sleep and concern. Together they crept out of their bedroom and toward the nursery. As they approached Jacob's room, the sound became clearer. It was a growl, low and menacing. Lisa's hand trembled as she reached for the doorknob. 1,000 terrifying scenarios flashed through her mind in that instant, but nothing could have prepared her for what she saw when she opened the door. There in the soft glow of the nightlight stood Lila. The usually gentle dog was rigid, her hackles raised, teeth bared in a silent snarl, and she was staring directly at Jacob's crib. "Lila!" Lisa gasped, her voice a mixture of shock and fear. "What are you doing?" At the sound of Lisa's voice, Lila's head snapped towards them. For a moment, the growl intensified, and Lisa felt a chill run down her spine. But then, as quickly as it had appeared, the aggression seemed to melt away from Lila's posture. Her tail wagged hesitantly, and she looked up at Lisa and Mark with her usual gentle expression. Mark quickly moved to check on Jacob, who miraculously had slept through the entire incident. "He's fine," Mark said, relief evident in his voice. "Sound asleep." Lisa knelt beside Lila, her hands shaking slightly as she stroked the dog's fur. "What happened, girl?" she murmured. "What got into you?" But Lila, now back to her usual self, simply leaned into Lisa's touch, her brown eyes full of love and confusion, as if she herself didn't understand what had just transpired. That night, as Lisa and Mark lay awake in bed, they tried to make sense of what had happened. "Maybe she heard something we couldn't," Mark suggested. "You know how sensitive dogs' hearing is." Lisa nodded, but she couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that had settled in the pit of her stomach. "I've never seen her act like that before," she said softly. "It was like she didn't even recognize us for a moment." They both hoped it was just a one-time occurrence, a strange anomaly in Lila's otherwise impeccable behavior. But as the days passed, it became clear that something had fundamentally changed. Every night at almost the same time, Lila would position herself by Jacob's crib and begin to growl. It wasn't the playful rumble she sometimes made during the tug-of-war games. This was different. A low warning sound that seemed to vibrate through the entire house. Lisa and Mark tried everything they could think of to stop the behavior. They left the nursery door open, thinking perhaps Lila was feeling anxious about being separated from the baby. They tried closing it, hoping that out of sight would mean out of mind. They even attempted to have Lila sleep in their room. But somehow she always found her way back to Jacob's crib. As the weeks wore on, the nightly disturbances began to take their toll. Lisa and Mark were exhausted, their nerves frayed from the constant stress and lack of sleep. They argued more frequently, their words sharp with fatigue and frustration. "We can't go on like this, Mark," Lisa said one morning, her voice cracking with emotion. What if Lila hurts Jacob?" Mark ran a hand through his hair, his own eyes red-rimmed from another sleepless night. "She would never," he said, but there was a note of uncertainty in his voice. "Lila loves Jacob." "I know she does," Lisa replied, tears welling in her eyes. "But you've seen how she gets. It's like she becomes a different dog entirely." They decided to take Lila to the vet, hoping there might be a medical explanation for her sudden change in behavior. Dr. Anderson, who had been caring for Lila since she was a puppy, listened carefully to their concerns. "And this only happens at night?" he asked, gently examining Lila's ears and eyes. Lisa nodded. "Always around the same time, too, between 2 and 3 in the morning." Dr. Anderson frowned thoughtfully. "Well, physically, Lila seems to be in perfect health. No signs of pain or discomfort that might explain the growling." He scratched Lila behind the ears, eliciting a contented sigh from the dog. "Have there been any other changes in the household? New routines? New people coming around?" Mark shook his head. "Nothing out of the ordinary. We've been pretty much homebodies since Jacob was born." The vet's brow furrowed. It's unusual for a dog to suddenly change behavior like this, especially towards a family member they've known since birth. "Keep a close eye on both Lila and Jacob. If anything else changes, don't hesitate to bring her back in." They left the vet's office feeling even more confused and concerned than before. That night, as Lila took up her now familiar post by Jacob's crib, Lisa sat in the hallway, watching through the crack in the door. Lila's eyes never left Jacob, her body tense, that low growl a constant presence in the otherwise quiet room. As she sat there, Lisa couldn't help but think back to all the moments Lila had shared with their family. She had been there when they brought Jacob home from the hospital, had patiently endured his clumsy baby hands grabbing at her fur, had been his constant companion during tummy time on the living room floor. How could this same dog now be a source of such worry and fear? The weeks dragged on, and the nightly ritual continued. Lisa and Mark were at their wits' end. Some of their friends suggested they might need to consider finding a new home for Lila, a thought that broke their hearts. She had been part of their family for so long. The idea of giving her up was almost unbearable. But as much as they loved Lila, Jacob's safety had to come first. They decided to give it one more week before making the difficult decision to rehome her. It was during this final week that everything changed. Lisa was in the kitchen, absently stirring a pot of soup for dinner, her mind preoccupied with thoughts of Lila and what they were going to do. Jacob was in his playpen in the living room, happily babbling to himself as he played with his toys. Suddenly, Lila, who had been lying at Lisa's feet, jumped up and raced into the living room. Lisa heard the familiar growl, followed by Jacob's startled cry. Panic surged through her as she dropped the spoon and ran after Lila. What she saw when she entered the living room stopped her in her tracks. Lila was standing over Jacob, who had fallen silent, her body rigid, teeth bared. But she wasn't looking at Jacob. Her fierce gaze was fixed on a point just behind the playpen. And then Lisa saw it, a large dark shape slithering across the floor, mere inches from where Jacob sat. A snake, a big one. In that moment, everything became clear. Lila hadn't been threatening Jacob all those nights. She had been protecting him. "Jacob, don't move," Lisa said, trying to keep her voice calm despite the fear coursing through her. "Lila, good girl. Stay." Lila didn't need Lisa's command. She remained steadfast, her growl never ceasing, as she kept her eyes locked on the snake. Moving slowly, Lisa inched towards Jacob. The snake, a large black rat snake, as she would later learn, seemed more interested in retreating than attacking, but she wasn't taking any chances. Just as she reached Jacob, Lila lunged forward, positioning herself between them and the snake. In a flurry of motion that seemed to last both an eternity and a split second, Lila pinned the snake down. With a quick shake of her powerful jaws, she dispatched the intruder, then dropped its limp body at Lisa's feet. Lisa scooped Jacob up in her arms, her heart pounding. "Oh, Lila," she breathed, reaching down to pat her head with her free hand. "You wonderful, wonderful girl." Lila looked up at her, her tail wagging, all traces of her earlier fierceness gone. She was once again their gentle, loving family dog. That evening, as Lisa and Mark recounted the day's events, they felt a mix of relief, gratitude, and shame. How could they have doubted Lila's loyalty? She had been trying to tell them something all along, and they had been too blind to see it. They learned later that a nest of snakes had been discovered in their neighbor's yard, explaining the sudden appearance of the one in their living room. The exterminator they called to check their property praised Lila's instincts. "That dog of yours has got a nose for danger," he said, patting Lila's head. "You're lucky to have her." They couldn't have agreed more. From that day forward, Lila's nightly vigils took on a new meaning. No longer did her growls fill them with dread. Instead, they reassured them that their faithful protector was on duty, keeping their little one safe. As for Jacob, once he was old enough to understand, they told him the story of how Lila had saved his life. He became Lila's biggest fan, often telling anyone who would listen about his heroic dog. The incident changed their family dynamics in beautiful ways. Mark and Lisa found themselves appreciating Lila more than ever, often marveling at the depth of her devotion to their family. They also learned a valuable lesson about trust and instinct. Lila had trusted her instincts about the danger to Jacob, and they should have trusted their instincts about Lila's inherent goodness. It was a reminder that sometimes when we can't understand something, we need to have faith in those we love. As the years passed, the story of Lila's heroism became a family legend, retold at gatherings and to new friends. Lila lived to a ripe old age, staying true to her protective nature until the very end. Even in her twilight years, with gray around her muzzle and a slight stiffness in her gait, she would still make her nightly rounds, checking on each family member before settling down to sleep. When Lila finally left them, it was with the knowledge that she had lived a life full of love and purpose. They buried her in the backyard, under the old oak tree where she used to love to lie in the shade. Jacob, by then a teenager, insisted on planting flowers around her grave, a colorful tribute to the colorful character who had been such an integral part of their lives. Today, as Lisa watches their new puppy, another golden retriever like Lila, tumble around the yard with Jacob's own children, she's reminded of the incredible bond between humans and dogs. She thinks of Lila, of her unwavering loyalty, her protective instinct, and the lessons she taught them about trust and understanding. In the end, Lila was more than just a pet. She was a guardian, a hero, and a beloved family member who showed them the true meaning of unconditional love. Her legacy lives on in their hearts and in the stories they tell, a testament to the extraordinary impact one devoted dog can have on a family's life. As Lisa sits there, watching the new generation of their family grow and play, she can almost hear Lila's reassuring growl in the distance, a reminder that love, in all its forms, is always watching over them. The story of Lila and Jacob serves as a powerful reminder of the deep connections that can form between humans and animals. It highlights the importance of trust, patience, and the willingness to look beyond the surface when trying to understand the behavior of our furry companions. For the Thompsons, the experience with Lila transformed their understanding of what it means to be a family. They learned that family isn't just about blood relations, but about the bonds of love, loyalty, and protection that tie us together. Lila, in her own way, had become as much a parent to Jacob as Lisa and Mark were. The incident also sparked a newfound interest in animal behavior for Lisa. She began volunteering at the local animal shelter, sharing Lila's story with potential adopters, and helping to match dogs with the right families. She became an advocate for understanding and patience when it came to pet behavior, always encouraging people to look deeper and try to understand the root of any issues before giving up on their furry friends. Mark, too, was profoundly changed by the experience. He started a community initiative to educate their neighbors about local wildlife and how to coexist safely with the animals that shared their environment. The snake incident had been a wake-up call, reminding them that they were part of a larger ecosystem, one that required respect and understanding. As for Jacob, growing up with the story of how Lila had saved his life instilled in him a deep love and respect for animals. He grew into a compassionate young man, always ready to stand up for those who couldn't speak for themselves. In high school, he started a club dedicated to raising awareness about animal welfare issues, and he dreamed of becoming a veterinarian. The Thompsons' experience with Lila also had a ripple effect on their community. Their story spread, inspiring others to look at their own pets in a new light. The local news even did a feature on Lila, dubbing her the guardian angel dog. This led to an increased interest in adopting rescue dogs in their area, with many families hoping to find their own loyal protector. But perhaps the most profound impact was on the Thompsons themselves. The night of the snake incident had been a turning point, not just in their relationship with Lila, but in their approach to life. They had come so close to making a terrible mistake, to giving up on someone they loved because they couldn't understand her behavior. It taught them the value of perseverance, of holding on even when things seemed darkest. This lesson served them well in the years that followed. When Jacob struggled in school, they didn't give up on him, but worked tirelessly to find teaching methods that suited his learning style. When their marriage hit a rough patch during the stress of Mark's job loss, they remembered Lila's unwavering loyalty and fought to reconnect and understand each other. Time and again, they drew strength from the memory of Lila's devotion.